Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Can somebody just confirm that they're able to see my screen?
Yes, Manisha.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. And welcome to our fourth and our final session of our BRSR webinar series that we have titled Tuesdays for Transition. We've been conducting it for 4 Tuesdays, today being the 4th Tuesday. It's all about the transition from the old BRSR format to the new BRSR format for this financial year, helping to make corporate India BRSR ready for FY24. So this BRSR webinar series is being conducted by AdQuest Sustainable Solutions. I'm Manisha Joshi. I'm an ESG consultant with AdQuest. In AdQuest, we do a lot of sustainability-related work. We do sustainability consulting. We provide advisory services to corporates and to education institutions. We also help prepare the BRSR or ESG reports in a very mature manner, which helps you to, helps all of your stakeholders to derive value from that. And also in a way that helps you to get through your assurance process in a very smooth manner. This is an overview of our 4-part BRSR series that we have had. We started off with the BRSR Gone By. This was November 21st that we started it, where we talked about the hits, misses, and opportunities. I just want to give a brief overview of the flow of how we have done these 4 webinars before we start off. So just to get started, like we had done the BRSR Gone By, where it was more of a looking back at the year that had passed and how we had done our reporting. Especially in AdQuest, we've done a lot of analysis of more than 200 reports of the BRSRs of the past financial year. So we had a lot of examples to put forth of like mistakes that were made, the things that went really well, and opportunities that we thought for making improved reporting for the current financial year. And then we had a second session on benchmarking BRSR reports against global best practices. And here we picked the integrated reporting principles as the global best practice. And we were examining what are the benefits of using the IR principles and why we're doing it, how we're doing it. And in a way, this session is actually linked to our today's session, because today we're going to focus a lot about assurance. So we were explaining about how the IR principles helps to drive assurance readiness. So that was 2 weeks ago that we had a session. Last week's session was stacking the BRSR disclosures, industry level insights derived from XBRL analytics. Where we had a senior person from XBRL International who came and presented a lot of insights that we had derived. So we had done analytics on more than 1,000 XBRL reports. So it was a very interesting session. And also just to remind everybody, we're also going to be publishing a paper which would have all these insights. In fact, probably much more would be provided in the paper, because our webinar was a limited time duration. So we'll keep everybody posted about this paper. And moving on to today's topic, it's decoding the delta. What do the FY23-24 BRSR changes mean? So this is more like the forward-looking session where we're going to be talking about the 84 essential data points that have been added, BRSR core attributes and parameters, supply chain preparedness, and reasonable versus limited assurance. These are the 4 main topics. And we're going to be having 2 speakers today. The main speaker is going to be Mr. Aniket Eram. He's a senior partner at PPEA and Associates. He would be supported by Anveshi Gutta. And just to give a quick, structure for this 1 hour, after my introduction, the experts would be speaking for 30 minutes, after which we would be having a 10-minute Q&A session. The last 15 minutes would be an exclusive sneak peek into the work that we're doing here. And quickly, before I hand over the mic, I just want to give a brief introduction to Mr. Aniket. Mr. Aniket has more than 20 years of industry experience, including internal audit, compliance, risk and assurance management. He's actually a chartered accountant by profession, and he's also a certified BRSR consultant by the ICAI. He's specialized in non-financial disclosures and assurance standards, and he provides advice, and he also does the third-party assurance on sustainability disclosures by listed and non-listed entities as well. Like I mentioned, Anveshi will be supporting him. He'll be covering the first two topics. As most of you know, he's the CEO of AdQuest. He also comes with 20 plus years of work experience. And prior to founding AdQuest, he was a director with PwC. So I'm just going to hand over the mic. Sorry, one quick thing for questions. Please do use the chat window to type in your questions. Audio is not going to be available today for asking the questions. So please provide your questions via chat. And in case we're not able to get to your question, in case we're running out of time, we'll definitely get back to you via email. So yeah, over to you, Anveshi.
Thank you, Manisha. Thanks for that. Okay. The BRSR template has seen an update from 22-23 to this cycle. The updates that we've seen across the questionnaire, across the format, is what has been collated here. So there's a bunch of new questions, and there's a bunch of questions that have been moved from leadership to essential. So there's 49 new data points that have been asked for, and 35 points that have been otherwise in leadership last year have now moved to essentials. That's the graphical representation of those changes. So you have a lot of changes that are happening in Principle 6, very busy there. And then the rest of them are very fairly well dispersed across the document. But the point being, with those kind of changes that have come in, there's also an additional aspect of assurance that has kicked in as well, which is the BRSR core, which is the focus of our conversation today. With Aniket being around, I think that's what we'll focus on. But before we pass it on to Aniket, I wanted to kind of get you folks onto this infographic that we've got. This one, the decoding BRSR core. And the infographic is, by the way, available for you to download if you wanted to from the website for free. But to explain this further, I'm zooming in and we'll take it a step at a time. What you see on this layout is the plan that SEBI has kind of put across for the transition, the roadmap for BRSR as we go forward. There'll be 150 companies that will go through what is called a reasonable assurance. The technicalities of what reasonable assurance is, I'm sure Aniket, who's going to take over after this, will explain it far better. So we'll wait for that. But 150 companies will have to do that reasonable assurance of their BRSR. It'll step up to 250 companies doing that from this 24-25 year. And the same 250 companies are also expected to, along with the fact that they'll do a reasonable assurance of their own BRSR, they're expected to additionally submit disclosures for their supply chain, or the value chain, like it's called, for at least 75% coverage of upstream and downstream supply chain. So that's the additional requirement that will come up from 24-25. Going forward, 500 companies will do BRSR reasonable assurance, and the 250 companies will still do the supply chain disclosures, but with an additional requirement of doing what is called a limited assurance. So the limited assurance expectation comes in with 25-26 for these 250 companies only. And then the top 1,000 companies will move into the BRSR reasonable assurance kind of a requirement from 26-27. So broadly, that's how it's going to pan out. If that is the timelines, but is the whole detail of BRSR code. So the code is about 79 different quantitative KPIs, which kind of are clubbed under 30 parameters, further clubbed under 9 attributes. The 9 attributes are basically 9 different themes of ESG, if you could call it so. You see that we have mentioned here, from changes in GHG footprint, water footprint, energy footprint, circularity, openness of business, well-being, gender diversity, pretty much giving a fair sense of coverage. And the good part is that clearly SEBI also notified it in July, saying that all of these need not be separately worked upon. So you can get to it while working on the BRSR. We'll get into that a little more. But before that, whom does this whole change or this transition to BRSR core and the assurance aspect, all of it matter to? very obviously, the report preparers, which is nothing but the folks from the industry, some of you who are on the call maybe, and you will have to, of course, now look at preparing the BRSR with a lot more rigor because of the expectation of the traceability of data for third-party assurance. Then there is an expectation of how it will impact the assurance professionals, the likes of Aniket and a larger community of assurance professionals, where there's an expectation that it requires a different set of capabilities or skills to do what is now called a non-financial reporting audit. So what is typically done by assurance, has been typically done by assurance professionals, has been the financial audits. Now we're talking of non-financial data out here. So that's another kind of a persona that will get impacted. Then there's this ESG fund managers. So in India, any ESG mutual fund scheme that will come from here on will have to kind of consider a proportionate inclusion of companies that are BRSR core compliant. There is a specific number, 65% of the portfolio of any ESG mutual fund scheme should be aligned with BRSR core compliant companies. But we'll get to that as well in a minute. But the last one, the ESG rating providers. So there's again from SEBI around mid this year there was a notification that said that there will be India specific ERPs going forward. So what does that mean? There will be India focused parameters that these providers ERPs will be expected to kind of use in their methodologies to finally assess and judge and then rate companies. So that would also mean a stronger alignment of these folks with what is being called the BRSR core. So that's the kind of different roles out there that will see an impact or for whom the BRSR core will matter. Now, a few graphical representations. So 80% of the BRSR core, which is what I mentioned as 79 KPIs, 80% of that directly maps to BRSR essential indicators. The keyword is directly, in the sense that you don't need to do anything beyond just taking the data from the BRSR and mapping it to the BRSR core and getting 80% coverage there. The rest of the 20 comes into what we call the traceable aspects of the BRSR essential indicators, which means it's not directly available in the BRSR, but through the BRSR you could still get to it. There's one exception to that. I believe later in the call we'll have someone mention about it. There's one exception to this which is not visible here, but we'll get to that when we get there. Then we have the trajectory of 150 companies in 23-24 going all the way till 1,000 companies by 26-27. That's the other numerical so-called trajectory. Then there's this thing about the whole ERPs that we spoke about, which is the ESG rating providers. For them to be having an India-focused methodology, SEBI also had initially given them a bunch of what they call the ESG parameters that they could consider as they evolve their methodologies. And when that is analyzed deeper, we observe that there's a 36% overlap of that guidance from SEBI for the ERPs with the parameters of the BRSR core. So that's a significant 1/3 overlap between the ERP rating providers and what BRSR core expects. And finally, there's this thing about the mutual funds. I was mentioning 65% as the magic number. So 65% of any mutual fund which is ESG labeled will have to come from BRSR core compliant companies. So which means to say any institutional investment that you as a company is seeking from the market will potentially have a say on how aligned you are with BRSR core. The rest of the 35 goes to BRSR compliant companies, but 65, which is the significant number, goes to BRSR core compliant companies, which is why it becomes that much more significant. And at the last point to make is that we also took these 79 KPIs of BRSR core and mapped them with the indicators and the targets, sub-targets, and the indicators of the SDGs. So an assessment of which kind of gave out this insight of the SDG number 8 and 12 being the most prominent connect with the BRSR core. Then there was the SDGs 11 and 13 that connected second best, let's say. And then 3, 6, 7, and 9 were also having a connect, but maybe a little lighter than the other ones. The point with this representation is that we've shown 8 SDGs that connect directly with what we are calling the BRSR core. It doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of it, which is the other SDGs, do not connect at all. Maybe there's an indirect one that will evolve, but on the face of it, these are the connects that we see. I think that's pretty much what this infographic is about. We want to simplify the whole idea of BRSR core for the audience, and that's what we try, like I said, available for free download. And with that message, I'll stop sharing and let Aniket take over to talk through the technicalities of the assurance side.
Yeah, hi, Anveshi. Thanks for setting that context, and thanks, Manisha, for that introduction at the start of the webinar. I just share my screen to start with. Just a moment.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think after the COVID advent, it was greatly realized by the business community or the world at large that the value chain or the supply chain needs to be more resilient. One of the best ways to do that was have the benefits of the sustainability practices percolate to that level. Uh, and BRSR core actually helps to do that, helps the business community with the companies get the supply chain partners in line with the sustainability practices. So over here, what I've come up with is some examples where the supply chain partners were not able to cope up with maybe it could be a safety criteria or environmental thing, or some violations on these aspects, some human rights aspects, and wherein there are a lot of damage to the reputation of the company, reporting company. Probably they must be having all sort of sustainability practices at the local level or at the management level, but the supply chain partners or the value chain partners were not that ready. As you can see, there are cases wherein there have been violations of the carbon emissions that I think we can see in some industries. There were some child labor instances in some industries. So because of there no control over the manufacturers or the value chain partners, there's a lot of unethical things or unethical businesses were happening at around these value chain partners. So BRSR core in a way tries to find out and report and actually reduce these instances wherein we see the value chain partners or the supply chain partners do not violate on these aspects, and the sustainability practices of the reporting entity is being extended to the value chain partners as well. Just to look at the expectations of the value chain partners. So by value chain partners, I would say not only the vendors or the suppliers, it also includes the customers. It also includes the distributors, the transporters, and every aspect of the business where some kind of value is added to the business. So as you can see, the vendors should follow sustainability practices in whatever they do, may material procurement, the producing consumables and providing services. There should be transparency in an ethical way in whatever they do, promote values and culture of sustainability, culture of the reporting entity. The way they transport goods and services to the end consumer must also be sustainable. So it should not be that there is a lot of emissions or a lot of there could be thinking on those lines as well, going electric or any renewable energy, coming up with energy efficient measures that will help in being more the practices being more sustainable. Also, one aspect which is neglected has been the waste. The kind of waste that is generated by these partners could be mammoth and can add up to the woes of the country in the future. So these are some value chain expectations that we see from an ESG framework perspective, which could be driven by the reporting entity, but needs to be ensured. The value chain partners also need to ensure that they also contribute to the sustainability practices or the objectives of the reporting entity in some way or the other. So coming to the value chain disclosures, as per as the BRSR core framework that we have been discussing, and also Anveshi also put some light on it during the initial phase of the webinar. So just to give you a very quick glance of it, the composition of the value chain as per the BRSR core is 75% of the purchases and sales by value. And this is cumulatively comprising. So the top 75% of the purchases, the suppliers or the customers or whoever comes into the value chain will have to be added up and seen to it how they contribute to or how they attribute their operations to the business of the reporting entity. So it is a very interesting part, like the value chain partners will have to assess themselves and see to it as to what attribute is applicable to them, and come up with the kind of data that is needed for the BRSR code. So a lot of self-assessment would be needed by the value chain partners, obviously with the help of the reporting entity, and bringing about the relation between the two, and provide a lot of data for this BRSR to be final. Let's quickly go on to the attributes that BRSR core is talking about. And I think Anveshi also touched upon it a bit. So there are 9 attributes that the BRSR core is seeking information on, and which is for which the value chain partners would be required to provide information on, and some of them are GHG footprint, the water footprint, energy footprint, the waste that is generated when they are actually dealing with the reporting entity, employee well-being and safety, gender diversity, inclusive development, and some social factors that the BRSR core is brought in. And it also shows us the kind of importance that the SEBI or BRSR or the SEBI is looking at from a social angle, how people are made inclusive, or what is the kind of diversity that they have. And there are some two new parameters like fairness and supplier engagement and openness of business, which have been added. So as we see a lot of S and E factors that have been included, and more so as we will definitely see how there has been growing importance of it, and it also needs to be seen that the data that is provided is assured by an independent assurer to show the creditworthiness or the trustworthiness of the data that is reported. Having said that, and having looked at the BRSR core requirements, it would not be an understatement to say that there will be a lot of challenges for the value chain partners to, as also with for the reporting entities, to come up with the kind of information that is required by the BRSR core. Firstly, there would be a lot of hand-holding required from the reporting entities or the companies with the value chain partners to ensure that there is a lot of engagement lot of cooperation. There is a lot of awareness that these value chain partners would require from the reporting entity as to what is sustainability, what are the objectives, what are the missions, or what are the goals that the reporting entity has taken, and ensure that their priorities or their materialities match with the value chain partners or the supply chain partners. Secondly, obviously, there will be a lot of information that would be required from these value chain partners, and this information would have to be of certain quality, should be consistent across, and there should be a standardization. So it would be a challenge for the entity reporting it to ensure that there is a standardized way in which the data is collated from different value chain partners, and a quality in the data or the information is maintained across. Third is the technological compatibility and confidentiality concerns. So these value chain partners could be small players as well, and matching up with the kind of information that is required from the BRSR core would be a tough task. Could be a tough task for some companies or some partners, as well as the confidentiality concerns. So there could be some partners who would be really reluctant to share the kind of information that is needed. Again, resource constraints, a lot of education and training requirements would be there for the reporting entity. A lot of handholding, as I said, a lot of training mechanisms would need to be deployed to ensure that the value chain partners are also on the same page as a reporting entity. And lastly, the compliance with assurance requirements. Obviously, this, as we already know, that this BRSR core will be general, where there is a need for it to be reasonably assured, and the value chain parameters to be limited assured in the years to come. So obviously, there will be a challenge with reporting entity, and this is a challenge for the assurance providers as well, as to how the data which is being provided by a third party, the value chain partner, would be assured. So that is some thought would have to be put in on that place, and it will be very pertinent to say that it is important for the reporting entity to engage with the assurance provider as early as possible to decide on the approach to be taken with respect to assurance requirements. So these are some challenges. Also, some challenges would be the kind of value chain partner that we have. So suppose, for example, if you take an example of L&T as a company, L&T has somewhere around 800 to 900 projects that are operational at a time across the country and even overseas. So having the kind of information for the reporting purposes of BRSR core would be a mammoth exercise for this. And it would depend more on how, what are the what processes they follow, and how they ensure that the reporting is accurate and is consistent across the value chain partners. Similarly, if there are a lot of MSMEs which are value chain partners, definitely that is going to be a tedious task at first place, to ensure that they understand what the sustainability practices or the objectives of the reporting entity is, and then coming up with the kind of information from them. So it is better that the value chain partners of a larger size are available for the reporting entity, and that would make somewhat make the exercise a bit, I think I would say, smoother than if there are MSMEs or lower players involved. Going on to the next agenda item that we have for today is the assurance perspective. As we see, there are this core BRSR core going for reasonable assurance, and the value chain disclosures going for limited assurance in some years. So coming to the lines of defense, traditional lines of defense, as we say, that every organization should have, or mostly all listed companies do have this, do have these lines of defense. Is the first line of defense being the management control and internal control measures that the company has across over their processes or the operations that they do. Second line of defense is obviously is the risk management, quality, inspection, compliance, and the finance guys, they put some internal controls in place. They have their own mechanisms to monitor or check the kind of information that is generated out of the entire business. Third line of defense is obviously the internal audit and is considered as an independent team in the organization. I say independent because it has a reporting structure directly to the governing body or the audit committee. And there's a fourth line of defense, I can say, is the external audit or the regulatory body. So a lot of data is taken into consideration by external auditors or the regulators, and they also throw a light on the kind of internal controls or the kind of processes in place with the companies, and how that information stacks in. Just to give a brief picture of the assurance side is. So there are 5 key elements of any assurance engagement, as we see on the screen. The three-party relation, 3 parties are involved. There is a subject matter, the underlying aspect. For in this particular case, it could be the GHG footprint or the energy footprint as from the BRSR core perspective. The criteria could be the GRI standards or the BRSR framework from a BRSR perspective. Evidence is the information that the practitioner or the assurance provider will obviously look at to ensure that whatever information is provided is backed up by supporting documents or processes or the audit trail. Assurance report is obviously the final output of the assurance engagement, which will provide the opinion of the assurance at the end of the assurance engagement. Just to give you a brief background of the assurance standards that are generally followed. So BRSR actually mentions 2 standards. The one is the ISA 3000, which is an internationally accepted assurance standard and is acceptable across the world. Similarly, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India also has come up with its own standard, SSAE 3000, which is also very widely used. So these standards basically say how these assurance engagements need to be performed. They have their own set of code of ethics. They have their own set of standards on quality control, which are to be maintained by the assurance providers throughout. Not only the assurance providers, but also the staff and whoever is working on the engagement need to ensure that the quality control is in place. Whatever work the assurance engagement owner does is there is a requirement of the quality control mechanism to ensure that there is a quality reviewer in place who actually sees to it that whatever testing or whatever approach the engagement owner has taken is plausible and is good enough to come up with the kind of conclusion from at the end of the engagement. Levels of assurance from both the standards point of view, it is the reasonable and limited assurance, which we'll obviously see in the next few slides, and which is also something which is expected by the BRSR code. So reasonable assurance is a type of assurance where the risk of material misstatement is reduced to a very low level. So obviously there will be a lot of procedures, comprising of analytical procedures, interviews, and SOPs, walkthroughs of the processes, then visiting the units of the factories and other units of the companies. But one major aspect that reasonable assurance conveys is that there is a requirement to understand the internal controls in place within the organization, and how those internal controls are, how does the company ensure that the internal controls are effective throughout the year or throughout the operating period, and ensure how does a company ensure that whatever data that they are generating is actually accurate and is trustworthy, so internal controls is actually one aspect of reasonable assurance, which sets it apart from the limited assurance perspective. As I said, it will involve extensive procedures, exhaustive evidence gathering procedures. Normally, it would for a BRSR kind of a project, it would involve some. It would be around 3.5 months, as I foresee that it would take for any company, for any listed companies, the internal controls to be tested for the BRSR core mandate. The reasonable assurance opinion is always in a positive manner. For example, in our opinion, the management assertion on the subject matter is properly prepared. In contrast to reasonable assurance, we have limited assurance, which reduces the risk of material statement to a low level, but not to the level of reasonable assurance. It involves far lesser tests. It only will look at the evidences, will look at the processes, but we will not test the internal controls as to see whether they are working and what processes are in place to ensure that the internal controls are working effectively within the organization. Conclusions of limited assurance are generally framed in a negative manner. As you can see, it is generally said that based on the testing performed, nothing has come to our attention to indicate that the management assertion on subject matter was not properly prepared. Yeah, so there is always an inherent limitation in every audit, not only in limited assurance, but that could be some cases because it's more on a sample basis that we perform the assurance. So there is an inherent limitation that there could be some instances where the conclusion might not be the same. Yeah. So just an overview of the internal controls as reasonable assurance is something which involves internal controls to a larger extent, and the assurance provider has to have an opinion on it. So the flow of internal control framework is generally like the organization determines the objectives of the various processes in place in consultation with the senior management. They obviously identify and assess the risks involved in the various processes, as well as the information that is generated out of it. Identify the control activities, what controls have been put in place by the different departments to ensure that whatever they do is backed by supporting documentation or is backed by approvals in place where they are required. There are enough checks and balances in place in whatever they do. Evaluate effectiveness. Obviously, all the controls will have to be evaluated on a periodic basis or on a transaction by transaction basis to ensure that whatever information is generated is accurate enough and it helps in achieving the objectives of the organization. As you can see, there are 5 components of an internal control framework. Generally, we see this control environment. There is a risk assessment. So before coming up to the controls for the organization or the different processes, there is a risk assessment that is done to see what kind of risks that the controls would address and come up with the kind of processes needed to ensure that the controls are in place and are effective. Information and communication, again, is one of the component, and monitoring activities. How does the company monitor that the controls are actually effective and smoothly running throughout the entire, probably the entire year or so. So these are some internal controls perspective. So what do assurance providers expect? So before going for an assurance of your sustainability information, it is very much important that the company has a hold on their processes and the policies. There is adequate documentation and record keeping for all the in terms of BRSR for all the parameters that the BRSR core has mentioned. There are internal controls in place and they are being there is enough evidence to show that these internal controls have been tested and they're working very fine. Transparency and disclosure, obviously, there are a lot of methodologies that will be involved. For example, in GHG emissions is a case wherein a lot of methodologies are involved and a lot of sources are referred to. So there's a transparency around that, data sources, assumptions. A lot of assumptions and estimates are used in sustainability data. So a lot of transparency and disclosures are needed on those fronts. Alignment with standards and GRI standards and frameworks like GRI, SASB, TCFD if the company is going for it. But in this case, it would be more the BRSR core, which provides us with a standard framework for the kind of data that is needed. Additional aspects like risk management, materiality, stakeholder engagement, third-party verification and assurance. So every aspect of sustainability or every aspect of the business where the assurance provider would like to have a comfort position as to what kind of data it is reporting will have to be kept ready before the assurance provider comes in. Probably it would be very good if the assurance, if the company has a good amount of engagement with the assurance provider before and try to understand what the objectives or what approach would the assurance provider take. Okay, so that's from the assurance perspective. And just to bring out a case study, a recent case study from September 2023, where the Securities Exchange Commission of US actually fined the Deutsche Bank subsidiary DWS for $19 million, wherein it was found that the investigation showed that a lot of greenwashing was done and a lot of information which was not supposed to be supposed to have gone into the public domain had actually gone, and there were a lot of public statements about it which the company was not able to substantiate. So as you see, a lot of importance is gathering around the sustainability information, and there is no, and even the LODR or the listing obligations and disclosure requirements of the SEBI have enough regulations in place for penalizing the companies on those fronts as well. So to which the company should be very careful in whatever reporting that they do, and ensure that the information provided on the public domain is controlled as an assurance of some independent auditor or a practitioner, and the data is trustworthy enough. Yeah, so that is from me, from the assurance perspective that I wanted to take you through. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aniket, for the very insightful session. So we will, due to the time crunch, we'll only be able to address a few questions, I believe. But we have a couple of questions that have come in. I'll read them out one after the other, and you can answer them accordingly. So the first question is by Ankita. Any specific reasons why BRSR has gone in for reasonable assurances instead of limited in the first go?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if you see globally, a lot of countries have started with limited assurance, but a lot of data has been actually a lot of parameters have been added to that. But if you see the SEBI has taken a very contradictory viewpoint on that. And if you see, there have been limited parameters, but to ensure that the information is accurate enough, there's a reasonable assurance in place. So as you see, there are less parameters, but a stringent assurance objective is there. So I guess, and if you see, only the top 150 companies will go through this, and I feel the top 200 companies are in a much better position to come up with the kind of data and also to pass the assurance test at this point of time. So as we see, it is called a glide path, and we will definitely see more companies being added as we go through.
Thank you, Aniket. The next question is by Naveen. Will assurance of the BRSR reports really help improve the reliability of the data disclosed by reducing greenwashing in company disclosures?
Yes, obviously, yes. So that is the objective of SEBI at this point of time. If you see the sustainability reporting that is happening at this point of time, there has been no assurance perspective, but companies have been doing it voluntarily. But as from an assurance perspective and being an assurance, from the background, from the assurance background, I would definitely say that yes, definitely we see that a lot of seriousness is definitely comes in when an assurance or a third party reviewer comes in and gives an opinion. And obviously this will again go into the public domain. So there is absolutely no other way that this will definitely bring in that much needed trustworthiness to the kind of information that goes into these sustainability reports.
Okay, thank you. The next question is by Sushmita. Who are the assurance providers in the market today? Can the CA firm auditing the company's financial be an assurance provider?
Yes, so if you look at the frequently asked questions of the BRSR core, that definitely it does not give you a qualification perspective to say who can be the assurance providers in this case. But definitely these assurance providers would be something who have the relevant expertise in the particular field. Probably yes, the chartered accountants or the people who are auditing the financial statements can also be the assurance providers of BRSR. But obviously they need that kind of expertise in that particular field. Having said that, it is also necessary that the assurance provider is not in any way related to the reporting entity. That is, the assurance provider should not be in any other capacity, related or involved in providing any services to the company. But yes, if he is the assurance provider from the financial perspective, he can definitely go ahead and provide an assurance on the sustainability information as well.
Okay, thank you, Aniket.
Welcome.
Due to the time crunch, we will, I'll just inform everyone else that we'll get back to you with the answers over email. Right now I'll pass on the mic to Manisha. She can.
Hi, Sudhi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aniket, and thank you, Nrishi. It was a very informative session. Just wanted to, tie in this, whatever we were talking about assurance, to the extensive analysis that we are doing on the BRSR core within AtQuest. So we are doing a lot of analysis on the BRSR report from different angles. Some of them being maturity, some of them being alignment with the IR, and one of them is about the BRSR core. So I just wanted to showcase how we're doing it and the report that we do submit to our companies, to our customers. Sorry, that's what I mean. So I think, are you able to see my screen, Stuti?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of weeks ago, I was just mentioning about the gap assessment service that we provide to our customers, wherein we take their previous year's BRSR and then we do an analysis on what are the gaps which are identified. And so we do it specifically also for the BRSR core, just so that the company is able to bridge those gaps so that for the next financial year, they're able to be ready for the assurance. So that is conveyed in this one chapter, which is the chapter 8, which is talking about assurance readiness against the BRSR core. Just to refresh your memories in case some of you didn't see this earlier, basically we do a very holistic assessment, gap assessment, where we assess a BRSR report even for against the SEBI's guidelines. We assess it for maturity through the tool called SMAT, which is our own in-house tool. We provide a heat map on the ESG pillars. We give you a comparison with your industry peers. Like I mentioned, we do an assurance readiness against the BRSR core. And we also provide like how well aligned are you to the integrated reporting principles. So I'll just take you to this chapter to just show you how we are doing it. In this chapter, you will basically be getting a chart like this, which will show you how ready you are, and you get an overall readiness for the BRSR core audit. So this is actually done for a particular company for an actual report. And how we arrive at this number, we take the 79 KPIs, which are called out in the BRSR core, and we categorize them as available in the BRSR under essential indicator, or traceable through the BRSR, or not available in the BRSR. And then what we do is we have a tool where we're checking for the answers if they're available or not. And then we create this table over here. So for example, in this report, 34 of the KPIs which come under this available in the BRSR essential indicator. Sorry, I didn't explain this. Available in the BRSR essential indicator means that this KPI is readily available for you to see it in the BRSR report itself. Whereas traceable through the BRSR means that it is a number or a parameter which is not like explicitly given in the report, but it would be a number which has been used in the calculations to arrive at an answer which is in the report. So basically that's the categorization, and these numbers will tell you like how many were found under ready, how many were not found, like 23 KPIs were not available in that report. 6 KPIs were not applicable to that company or to that industry. So, and then, 11 that were traceable through the BRSR were ready, 4 were not ready. And 1 which was not available in the BRSR is categorized here. I'll get to this in a couple of minutes. I'll also just, share with you, this is what the Annexure 1, the format of the BRSR core looks like. Some of you might have already seen this. This is the annexure that is available from SEBI's notification of July this year, where you will be able to see like, this is an attribute, greenhouse gas footprint. You would see energy footprint, water footprint, circularity, then social ones like employee well-being, safety, gender diversity, and until the 9th one, which is the openness of business. So just wanted to show how we go about doing it. So like for example, if we take this row item, we would see that there are 6 KPIs which are provided here. One is absolute fossil fuel consumption, emission factor, quantity of carbon capture, GHG emissions in CO2 equivalent by process, fugitive emissions, and the 6th point being a total scope 1 GHG emissions, which has a formula for 0.2 into 0.1 minus 0.3 and so on and so forth. So basically SEBI is giving you like how to calculate this, and this is what you're supposed to give. And if you look at the last column over here, there's a cross reference to the BRSR. So it shows here that if you look at under principle 6, question 7 of essential indicators, all of these data points should be available. So I'm just going to open up the BRSR format and show that to you. So this is the format, BRSR format for this current financial year. I'm under principle 6. And if I go down to question number 7, you will see here that it's asking for provide details of the GHG emissions, scope 1, scope 2, the total, and then emissions intensity. So if we look back at this, it is very clear that this one is available in the BRSR because it's total scope 1 GHG emissions. However, something like an absolute fossil fuel consumption is something which would have to be traceable. So like Aniket was mentioning that, there would be a lot of traceability requirements. You would want to see all the back papers. How are the calculations arrived at? So these are examples of traceable through the BRSR. And this is the one KPI which we were not able to find anywhere in the BRSR, the quantity of carbon capture. So we've actually scanned through the entire BRSR format. And the question that comes closest to it is this question 8, which asks, does the entity have any project related to reducing greenhouse gas emissions? If yes, then provide details. But however, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and carbon capture are not quite the same. And so this is the KPI that has come under this categorization that we said not available in the BRSR. So this is the sort of graph, this is the sort of chart that you would see in the document. And then this was the chapter which I was referring to, which was the IR principle alignment. This also helps your company to achieve high assurance ability. So it will help you to get through your assurance in a very smooth manner, right? So I know that we're at 5 o'clock. So I'm just going to quickly wrap this up. I just wanted to, thank everybody for their participation. This has been like, 4 weeks of knowledge sessions. It's been, packed sessions. We've had a lot of information provided in this. We've tried to make it as 360-degree a view as possible. We spoke about the BRSR of the past year. We spoke about XBRL. We spoke about what to do in the, for the current financial year. And Aniket has also given you, some tips on, trying to start this off as soon as possible, just because the engagement itself would take some amount of time to get through a proper, reasonable assurance process. So, we're happy to have had all the good participation in the past 4 weeks. We have shared a lot of documents through these past 4 weeks. We have talked about our BRSR Done Right research guide. We have shown you, we've actually gone through the entire document, gone through bits of it. In case anybody is interested to, take a closer look, please do get in touch with us. Do get in touch with us if you want us to help you with your BRSR or ESG reporting, or if you require any help doing a gap assessment. Do let us know if you require any help with your sustainability journey, sustainability strategy, etc. Thank you once again. Please do use this QR code if you want to get in touch with us. Thanks, Anveshi. Thank you, Aniket. Thank you for all the audience for making time on your Tuesday afternoon to attend our session.